Good evening. Welcome to Diversity in Central Ohio. This is a program of the Community Relations Commission and Mayor Michael B. Coleman.
And I'm Nelson Hewitt, your co-host. We're having our show tonight at a special night, and we're at COSI, at the COSI race exhibit. This exhibit is going on through May, and we're fortunate to be here to have our show, this very special show tonight in COSI. So we want to thank you for joining us tonight.
My name is Neal Semel, and I want to introduce you tonight to some special guests we have. All of our guests this evening for this segment are children of survivors and Holocaust educators, and let me introduce you to them. We have Dr. Sid Price. Hello, Sid.
Hi.
We have Sandy Hackman. Hi, Sandy.
I know.
Mr. Ron Core. How are you, Ron?
Hello, fine.
Good. If you would, and we'll start with you, Sid, is just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you here this evening. What's your connection to what we're talking about and the Holocaust and the education piece and all of it?
Well, my connection is that my parents are both survivors of the Holocaust. My mother passed away 4 years ago, but my father's still alive. He's 89 right now and lives in Florida. And he'll be coming up to speak at Mayor Coleman's event April 20th from 12 to 1 on the Yom HaShoah.
All right, great. Sandy, how about you?
I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. I had, my mother lost her husband. My father lost his wife and children, and my stepfather lost his wife and children. So I'm very familiar with the Holocaust stories, some of the stories, and I grew up with friends of Holocaust survivors, children of Holocaust survivors, so that was my life growing up when I was young.
All right, well, thank you. And Ron, how about yourself?
I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. My mother was from Czechoslovakia and my father from Austria. And after both were interned in the camps, they both then went to Israel after the war, and then after Israel, then they migrated to the United States. And I'm a first-generation American.
Well, first of all, I want to really just kind of help our audience understand, when we talk about the Holocaust, what are we talking about? What was the event? Anybody?
Well, I'll go. The Holocaust was the World War II, basically. And we're here because 6 million Jews were killed during World War II by Hitler and the Nazis. And so our parents were lucky enough to survive that. And my father escaped from 5 different concentration camps. And otherwise, I wouldn't be here. My brothers wouldn't be alive. You know, my dad and his family probably lost 200 family members in the Holocaust. He was originally from Poland and survived a lot of Polish concentration camps, including Auschwitz. So.
Sid, let me ask you a question. You said 5 different camps?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, you know, I've heard of people being moved from a camp, but that's quite a few camps.
Right,
for
it
them
is.
Do you know anything about the reasons for 5 different camps?
Well, I mean, he would, some of them, the first couple, he would be captured and escape the first day before they even had his name or recorded. Somebody would help him get on a truck at night and hide out and sneak out the same night. A couple others, well, the very last one was 6 months before the war ended. He was on a death camp in Auschwitz on a death march, and just walked away and escaped from the death march and went and hid in some farms, and somebody was able to help him. He slept in a farm for about 6 nights before he was so hungry he had to go in, and some people were nice enough to give him some food so he could survive. And they gave him some clothes because they were in striped uniforms, and so if anybody would see them, you know, they would recapture them. So he was lucky enough that somebody gave them some different clothes to wear. And
that's very amazing.
Yeah.
So maybe we should go to Sandy and hear a little bit about her story as well, so we can get some of the people can understand that this was a government implemented strategy, 1933 to 1945. So what happened with your folks?
My family all they were all from Poland. They were from a small town called Trochenbrod. The Polish name was called Sofiówka. But the town of Trochenbrod was of 3,000 to 4,000 Jews that lived one long road, and the road was on each side was a ditch, and on each side, because that was how the water drained, and then over the ditch was the houses. And your house, they were one next to each other, and as far back as you could see, that's as much land as you had, clear into the forest, whatever. So they all lived there. They all were merchants. They baked their own breads. My grandfather used to go from town and come back, and many of the non-Jewish people there, they supported him, whatever, because he was a very pious man. And then our family, the war started, and it started changing. It was going into Polish hands, then Russian hands. And when the Russians came in, they told all the families they could not keep their religion. They took their horses, their cows, their chickens, their everything away from them, and families had to stand in line for sugars and things of that sort. They could not do their own dairy and butter, whatever they did before. So, and they said, my sister said, I can't write, I can't, on the Sabbath, which was on Saturday. And they said, yes, you must. We don't have religion here anymore. And she says, well, I can't. And they went to my mother's home with her, my sister's husband, and said, you tell her she has to write on Saturday, or we're shipping you all to Siberia. So this was the lifestyle there, that, you know, they were oppressed. And then when the Nazis came in, they formed a ghetto in that town. When they came into the town, the town was set where there was no railroads around. So it was one long road. The only way to get in and out was a horse and buggy, whatever. So how they came into the town was they came in uniforms and horses, and then they came in with their machinery, whatever, their big, you know, tanks, whatever, and trucks, to then form a ghetto. And once the ghetto was formed, they were taking people out and doing the death march, you know, where they would take them around in a certain area and start digging holes, and then they would kill you right over the holes, and that's how they started in our town, because there was no way to take 3,000, 4,000 people out of that town on trucks. There was no trains. So my grandfather knew the forest really well, and my mother escaped through the fence with her 3 children. I have an older sister and 2 older brothers, but I must say my older sister just passed away. And they survived the Holocaust with my mother. Her husband was taken off right away. They took the young men into the Russian armies right away to be used on the front lines. So they were usually killed right away because, you know, they didn't want their soldiers killed. So, you know, we're easily to be, you know, they didn't mind if they were killed. So it ended up that in the forest was my grandfather, my mother and her 3 children, my one uncle with his daughter, his wife and other child was killed. My uncle, the other uncle, his wife and 2 children were killed. And my one aunt, her husband and child was killed, but she was there with her one daughter, as was my mother. So there were like 10 in the beginning. Sometimes other family members, people would come by and want to join. And what they did is they lived in the forest, they dug under the roots of the trees, they took like helmets, you know, Nazi helmets, whatever they could find, to take the dirt and take it far away, so that, you know, people walking by would not see that there was fresh dirt around, whatever. And they literally lived and under the roots with the lice. And one uncle that ended up coming over, he died from fright from the lice, because every day was picking on. You lived down with the water down below and the rats, and it was just 4 years of, you know, really bad, you know, survivor.
Horrible conditions.
Horrible conditions, you know, and food. They went to homes, they picked which one, like the older of my two brothers, he used to go with the one uncle and the grandfather to homes, like when they had their produce out in the backyard, they would see to take a cabbage leaf from one place and something else from another. You couldn't just take a plant out, because then it would show them that there are people around that are looking for food. And they would go into their trash, where they had their trash, and get out, you know, potato peelings and whatever trash they could find that people were just throwing away. You know, my mother said they used to make a fire, and they put a stick with a potato peel, and you would just hold the potato peel over the fire, and that was your potato skin, so to speak. And to this day, my brother won't eat potato skins at all. So, but, you know, that's how they lived for 4 years. And when the war was really over, they had planes coming over with leaflets flying down saying the war was over, you can come out now. And they didn't believe it. They thought it was just a prank to get the survivors to come out. But they later, grandfather found out. So, and they came to America. So,
Worked
and
out
here
a
I
bit.
am.
Ron, why don't you add your story to what's going on?
My parents, we didn't talk about it much as really growing up as children. We knew that they had a very respect for food, and it was very important to the family dynamic of having a dinner and having it available for us. And that was very key to their kind of family bonding and unit. And it was really interesting that was the most important thing that my dad really wanted to impress upon us. He was no food, no water. We kind of joke he had no electricity, never thought of anything like that, and then just had to live off their wits and survive off of anything they could. My mother was a little bit, not that I was fortunate, I do not have any grandparents. None of my grandparents survived. I have some, my brothers, my uncles on my father's side, but my mother was an only child. So we don't have any really connection beyond that first generation now. And growing up, you kind of know you're different because you have no grandparents. You just don't have any history or know anything about beyond your parents. And it's a very kind of, when you go to your school, how do you talk about your history? And there's kind of a hole there. And we kind of know that was World War II and the Holocaust causing it. And how do we tell our stories and our parents' stories, and that this secondary, source that we are? I mean, we really have to continue this conversation, because 70 years ago, people today are growing up and don't even know this occurrence in history, let alone the impact of what made it unique within history. And it's really a challenge for all of us here.
Ron, you say unique in history, and I know there are people who go, there's been other genocides. They're happening today. Why is this one the one we pick out and observe and talk so much about?
Well, the German government was able to create a besides a legal system, a social system that singled out the religious sector at this kind of point, and was able to put forth a genocide and a way that the rest of the world clearly did not understand this kind of impact and occurrence in this short time in history. The amount of Jews that had perished were 6 million, and there were 5 million non-Jewish people in this World War II that died, that were just part of the sympathetic arm of helping the Jewish community. So it's very hard to understand that they were taking over most of Europe and most of Africa and most of the world with this doctrine of eliminating the Jewish race. The United States and some of the countries, before they were able to act upon it, was already a lot of death had occurred at that point. And then there was a period afterwards where these people weren't allowed to go anywhere. You weren't allowed to migrate to the United States. There were quota systems. There were throughout the world. So they were really now dispersed beyond the world. And it was a very troubling moment for that history, because you had diaspora occur at that moment, and no international support system really in place to absorb that kind of diaspora. It was challenging at the moment.
I guess, and I direct this to all of you, it's so striking the impact and the horrors that your parents have faced and other relatives. What was the impact on you growing up? You know, how does it affect you? I mean, you're all very successful and prosperous people born in this country. What is the lessons that your parents learned, experiences that they had? How has it impacted you in your life? Anybody who wants to answer.
I've learned to get along with people. I feel that because of what happened, my mother was so happy to be in America. She, you know, that there wasn't, you know, somebody always looking over her shoulder telling her, you know, you have to do this. And she was so happy to be here. It's like, you know, we're here, we're free, we can practice our religion, we can practice our holidays, go to the church, go to temple. We can, you know, it's a freedom that I would say most children growing up today just do not understand, and it should be taught that we do have great freedoms here in this country, and it's amazing if people would just sit back and think, wow, I can practice my religion, I have customs I can practice, and your languages, everybody speaks different languages, and you accept colors. I mean, it's, you know, this is what America is all about. It's just, you know, my mother would kiss the ground, she said, when she came to America. Kiss the ground.
That's quite an image.
What about you, Sid? I think you were thinking a little bit about this question, too.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, tolerance is a big issue that comes from this, and respect, and just, and my parents also every day say, God bless America, you know, because, you know, without the Americans coming over and entering the war and rescuing them, you know, they would have never survived. So I don't know if you can see this book on the camera. I don't know if they can see this, but anyway, I'll hold it up. It doesn't show too well. That's my mother and father when they were younger and when they were older. And then if you Google my father, his name is Abe Price, A-B-E-P-R-I-C-E. If you Google him and under Naples, under Holocaust survivors, you'll see a lot of articles he's written, and it'll link you to books he's written that are available on Amazon.com. And you can see his story, and it's interesting, you know, just to read from someone who, you know, I've been a member of Columbus community for 30 years, and he's still alive, you know, but a few more years we're going to lose all of the survivors and all of the ex-military from World War II, there won't be around anymore, because he was between 17 and 22 during the war.
He was young.
He was young, but he was young enough that that's probably part of why he survived. He was strong enough and healthy enough to, even though they didn't get any food or water, they were on such a low-calorie diet. They might eat a potato for the whole day. They might have 300 calories for a whole day's food. That they got typhus, and many people died from other things. They'd put them in in these train cars, and they wouldn't just be packed in a train car like sardines for an hour. They'd be packed in them for 3 or 4 days, and people would die just in that, because there were no sanitary conditions. There was no bathrooms, no food. They would just be packed in there, and heat, no windows. And he helped develop the Holocaust Museum in Southwest Florida, which is located in Naples, Florida. And they were able to get a boxcar from the war, and they take it on around to different schools and teach in all the middle schools in Florida. And it's that's his goal now, is Holocaust education, and that's why he's coming up here to speak.
Just a reminder, Dr. Price's father, Abe Price, will be speaking at the Yom HaShoah ceremony April 20th at City Council Chambers, 90 West Broad Street, from 12 noon to about 1:30. It's open to the public. We encourage everyone to attend that event.
Well, Ron, what about you? What are the takeaways for you being a survivor's child?
Well, I think I'm more reflective on human rights, in that as I think that my parents weren't treated as humans for a few years of their lives, and trying to even pretend that I could understand what that really means to somebody, and that they were able to have a family and allow me to have a family is just such a kind of gift that has happened. That's really kind of what I'm thankful for.
Yeah. Well, I have to say to all three of you that to hear you talking about the loss is just overwhelming. And I think about my family, and even with the after effects of slavery in this country and some of those things, I still have my grandparents. I still have those family members. I didn't lose them, and it's just incredible, just beyond belief for me to hear that, and to think that one day everything's fine, and all of a sudden you're no longer a citizen, you're no longer valued by the country where you've lived your whole life. When I think of the stories that you're saying. And your father, Sid, is still willing to talk about this and share the story to help others learn about it.
Yeah, he does. A lot of survivors can't talk about it. My mother never talked about it, really, until she died. She did a couple times. She was recorded for Steven Spielberg's recordings for the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. They recorded histories of survivors, and so my parents were both recorded. But other than that, she didn't really discuss it much. And my father didn't really bring it up with us until we were probably 13 or so, until we were old enough to understand and know what was going on and not be.
Is that what you think was going on? I've heard this before, that it wasn't discussed in your family.
No.
It wasn't discussed at home because,
No.
how do you understand this dynamic of not talking about it? Because it is so important to talk about. We know that now. What do you think what do you understand about that dynamic?
They wanted us to grow up with a, quote, normal life, and not feel like they were different. They wanted to be part of the American fabric. And
so they were trying to protect you?
Yeah, basically. And so, it was difficult, but they still wanted the kids to go to school and get educations and get jobs and so work hard in school, and hopefully they felt like education would help get everybody a better life. But
so what opened up that conversation? What opened it up to make it happen? They just decided it was time to tell you now what happened?
Yeah,
in
and it
history.
came out a little bit at a time. It didn't all come out at once. In fact, I'm still learning more and more.
Even today?
Even today, reading my dad's books, I'm still learning more and more. And he writes articles for the papers, and I'm still learning more and more. He ended up joining a group after the war called DIN, which was Hebrew for judgment, which was a group of Jews and Russians. Russians were also killed during the war, and so were Gypsies, so were Catholics, so were blacks. You know, they
handicapped people.
Handicapped, yes, for sure. And so they were trying to make an ideal race, what they thought was an ideal race. And but I'm still learning more because they kept a secret of this association for 60 years. They didn't want anybody to know that after the war, some of these Jews and Russian went after Nazis that were still out there that the government didn't arrest or didn't put in jail, but they knew were still out there, that there were still Nazis, and so they tried to help capture some.
Ron, same in your family? Similar dynamic?
We didn't talk about it growing up. It was that sense of post-traumatic stress syndrome was get on with your life, and you never even thought it was different.
When did it come into your awareness?
Well, they associated, most of their close friends were all other survivors. Cleveland has a very large survivor population, so most of their really close friends were all survivors, and I grew up with a lot of children of survivors with that. So you kind of heard, and it was almost not that it was a competition of who had a worse story. You know, that's kind of when you did hear those stories, because they would just tell each one and kind of like through the dinner tables kind of thing. And that's when you really hear it, almost through that communal effort.
How about you, Sandy? Did your folks talk about it?
I knew my father's story, and my father died when I was young. My mother talked about her stories all the time. And just like Ron, my parents had survivors always at our house. And they got together and they told their stories, and I listened because it was just so different listening to everybody's story and how they all survived. To me, it was like my mother telling her story. I just grew up, it was just hard to believe that anybody had to suffer like they did, and still were able to go on with their lives, maybe have more children, maybe, you know, and it was tough, but yeah. It was, my mother always told me as much as she could tell me, and I felt very fortunate that I had a mom that was able to tell me those things. So
we're coming to the end of our segment right now, so I just want to kind of go around the group and just ask if there's any parting words you wish to have. You know, I know you're all very successful. You have other things that you do, but you spend a lot of time and energy and resource on telling these stories and making sure people are educated. Maybe you want to close with why that is. What's the message that you're trying to communicate to folks? And anyone who wants to kick that off.
Well, you just don't want this to ever happen again, you know, and it's, you know, you don't want to see any violence or any anti-Semitism, any anti-anything, any anti-religious or ethnic. You know, you don't want to see somebody painting a swastika on somebody's house, or you know, it's just, it's, you know, it's horrible, and any kind of things. That's why this exhibit here at COSI is really nice about race, and it's you just don't, it's basically never again. You don't want to see it happen again, and there's still things going on all around the world where we can help try to control that and prevent it.
Never again are very powerful words, especially when we're telling this story. Sandy, how about you?
I have children, and I was lucky enough to have a mother, parents that were just kind, and you know, I wanted to pass on their stories. I want my children to know their stories and their children, and hopefully life will be better for everyone, and everybody can live in harmony, and that's what we want out of life. So that's what my goal is with my kids and my family. So.
Ron?
I think it's, again, I think never forgetting. As we get older and some of our parents are not here anymore, that this lesson is just something that we have to continually talk about and continually keep in our minds, because the challenges still are there. I mean, we still have the same problems throughout the world, just a different level of the atrocities. And how do we continue talking about it and making sure that we understand this was history, and that this is making sure that this is the fact of what happened during World War II, and making confident that this story will be continually told.
Thank you very much. You're watching Diversity in Central Ohio, live from COSI this evening. We're going to take a very short break, and we'll be back with another panel of Holocaust educators. I would just want to thank our panelists for sharing their stories with us, and I really commend you for being here and sharing this with the world.